Okay, I'm registering 5 minutes past 7. I'd like to officially call our meeting to order. This is our virtual nomination meeting with our candidate nominees, Amanda Ladner and Mike Simpson. We have attendees who are monitoring this. The attendees will see a gallery or rather a speaker view. So whoever is speaking, they should be seeing that person. So when our two contestants are giving their speeches, answering questions, the attendees will be able to see them. So this meeting is scheduled to be from now, 7 o'clock until 8 o'clock this evening. I would like to first and foremost recognize that we live on the ancestral and unceded territory of Indigenous peoples. And I would like to have all of us observe a brief moment of silence, allowing each of us to reflect on the tragedy of the residential school system and its effects on survivors and families. So we'll hold a brief moment of silence. Thank you, everyone. I would like to share my screen so that people will be able to see the agenda for this evening. And should be coming up now. So I have called the meeting to order. I am introducing the agenda. I would like to do introductions of the people that you perhaps will see in the course of the evening. I'm required by Green Party of Canada to do a description of the process for our meeting this evening, and also the after the following election, as well as the choice of our candidate, who will be our candidate in the next federal election, and how that announcement will be made. There will be speeches by each of the nomination contestants lasting 3 minutes or up to 3 minutes. There will be a moderated discussion debate between the two contestants, and we will have closing remarks of about a minute's duration from each of the contestants, and we will adjourn at about 8 o'clock this evening. So that's an introduction of our agenda. I'll stop sharing my screen and move along to introductions. So if everybody would perhaps unmute their mic and say hello or wave so that they're showing in the speaker view when I introduce you. First of all, and perhaps most important, is our returning officer, Robin Spano, who is going to be our returning officer this evening.
Hi.
And next is our board member, John Colville, who is also our resident wordsmith and this evening's timekeeper.
Oh, hello.
We are joined this evening by Green Party supporter and member Jeff Scouten, who will be our moderator for the discussion debate portion of the evening.
Hello, everyone.
And lastly, but also perhaps most importantly for something like this type of meeting, is Ken, our resident tech expert for all things technical, and a person who is absolutely invaluable to our process.
Thanks, Richard. Hi, everyone.
And the stars of the evening, Amanda Ladner is one of our nomination contestants. Please say hello to Amanda.
Hi, everyone.
And Mike Simpson, our other contestant.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you. I am required by Green Party of Canada to now do a description of the process for this candidate choice mechanism. The process includes a nomination or nomination contestant speeches. We have decided that each nomination contestant will be allowed 3 minutes to make a speech of their choice, introducing themselves, their values, their ideas, why they'd like to be a candidate. After the speeches, there will be a discussion debate moderated by Jeff. And I am also required to say that the this meeting, which is called formally the virtual nomination meeting, will be followed by a 48-hour email election period. That will begin at about 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. We have been told by Green Party of Canada they are able to send out the bulk email with your ballots so that you can vote in this election, vote for the candidate of your choice. And those will be sent out about 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I wish I could be more precise, but that's what they have told us. The email that you will receive with your ballot will say what the 48-hour period is. If it's 9:15, then it will be 48 hours from 9:15 tomorrow morning. If it's 9 o'clock, then 48 hours after 9 o'clock. At the end of that email election period, the votes will be tallied up by Green Party of Canada, and the results will be sent to Robin, who is our returning officer. And at that point, we will be able to announce the winning candidate. That will be done by bulk email, and as well as being posted on our website and our social media accounts. So everyone will have a chance to know who the lucky winner is. So at this point, we have reached the point in the agenda of where the speeches by the nomination candidates. I'd like to do a short introduction of each candidate, and we can, Jeff, I think you had a coin with you this evening where we could flip a coin to see who goes first, so that it's so there's no favoritism.
That was
Okay,
the plan.
I will do my
But, who has coins these days?
So a brief introduction of each of our candidates. I will start with Amanda. Amanda Ladner, originally from Alberta, now residing in Whistler. Amanda is a successful zero-waste, healthy fast food restaurateur. She is passionate about gender equality, a mother of two, lover of nature, a voice for small business, a voice for families, and a voice for our future. And you can see more about Amanda at amandaladner.ca. Moving on to our second nomination contestant is Mike Simpson, who has been just about everywhere, but now calls Gibson's home. Mike is the founder of a successful nonprofit organization. He's principled, proven, and always proactive. Father to a daughter, a mover and influencer, passionate about cooperation, collaboration, and teamwork. You can learn more about Mike at www.mikesimpson.net. So with that, I would like to ask our moderator, Jeff, to flip a coin and find out who will be going first to make their speech.
Okay, I am going to give Amanda the choice as to whether heads or tails. Heads, you go
Heads.
first?
Heads.
Okay, all right. And heads it is. So you go first.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for coming tonight on a very, very, very warm evening. I mean, we feel it. We must all recognize right now, as we're experiencing this heat, that this is only the beginning, that we are going to continue to see record temperatures. And I think that this should cause us some concern. We're all here because we recognize that it's time. We've had 30 years, maybe 50, when first climate scientists told us that we were facing global warming. And so we need to do everything in our power now that we only have a few years left to really reverse global warming. So that's the reason that we're all here tonight, but really we need to be able to decide on who's going to lead us to build a thriving campaign and also a thriving party, and therefore, a thriving win and community. And so that's what brings me here today. We are suffering at a government level from a lack of commitment to a green future. We are suffering at a community level from a lack of support to build better. And we are suffering at a family level. We are all working harder for less. We have the opportunity to build a caring economy, one that we can build together, one that cares for people and planet. And that's why I'm here today. in my experience, growing 3 businesses, ethical, sustainable, zero waste, I have found that the barriers exist to being able to do this in a way that actually reduces carbon footprint. It is very challenging. I can tell you honestly that even today we are challenged to do that. So we must do everything we can to support businesses and families and people to make the dramatic decarbonization changes that we need in the society. A caring economy is one that really brings about caring jobs. Caring jobs are green jobs. These are jobs where we are caring for our ecosystems, for our communities. And we also need to think about how we are going to care for the planet in a way that doesn't do as much harm as we are currently. So really, this is an opportunity for us. We can build a caring economy, one that thrives. And I'm here tonight to tell you that it is possible. I joined the Green Party because I believe in the platform. I believe in the vision that this is for our country. I know that this is the party that most represents and embodies the vision that I have for the future. But let's be honest, our party has a lot of work to do. And I think tonight we're going to get some questions regarding what work we need to do to build a healthier, more inclusive party. Thank you, John. So really, I'm here to answer your questions. And what I want to say is that we can make it easier for families. We will build better, and we must commit to zero carbon. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
Okay, Mike, please go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Well, it's also a pleasure to be here. I think we met about a week ago, and in 1 week, I feel like I've lived a whole lifetime of Green Party politics because I had to travel to Saskatoon to visit with my mother, who was admitted to hospital in the emergency ward, and I got an inside view on what elder care looks like right now in Canada. Very personal inside view, and I know that's one of the subjects we want to cover tonight, but I also was in Saskatchewan when more than 750 unmarked graves were announced. And it was shocking in Saskatoon and other parts of the province to talk with people and to see just how much this is impacting our national psyche as we approach Canada Day in the next couple of days. And it is very much a political issue. So that's 2 political issues. And then on the way home, I went through Lillooet, and it was 45 degrees, and you saw today what happened. We've just hit a record of what was 46.6. So these are smashing all-time Canadian records. And for those of us that have been working in climate change for decades, we knew these moments were coming. We said a long time ago, we knew this was coming. And so now to live it and to realize, wow, not only must we navigate a reversal, but we must do it at a speed that is much faster than we first thought. And that is going to require the decision-making, the fast, very hard decisions that are going to have to be made in Canada, in Ottawa, and it's going to require very dedicated and very strong politicians. And so stepping up at this point, I've lived a whole life of advocacy and civil society, trying to make these changes, trying to make all of the changes of the Sustainable Development Goals that are called for a better future for 2030. This is the first time I've entered politics, the political arena, and it's because time is running out. And if people can't feel that today, of all days, as we swelter in the heat, as we see a heat dome that's covered our entire province, but as we witness this globally, because in Siberia right now, they're facing the exact same heat dome and shattering records there. Yesterday, I believe it was 2 days ago, pardon me, the permafrost hit 48.7 degrees ground temperatures. And to put that in perspective, that was a release in the month of June alone of 56 megatons of equivalent CO2. We're into tipping points now, people. And this means as we enter these tipping points, which we predicted, all the climate people and Green Party people were talking about this a long time ago. Well, now we're in it. And now of all times, we need the kind of dedicated action. So the type of leadership that I'm going to be putting forward tonight, I know this came up last time, what kind of leadership do we have? The kind of leadership that I am advocating is one in which you don't look to me for leadership, you look to yourselves, because I like to facilitate leadership. I like to take team approaches. And that's the kind of thing that we need to do at this point, is we can't see putting one MP in Parliament. We need to see in our riding that we're putting a whole group of Greens, and there'll be one person sitting in that seat, but it needs to be a group of us. We need to be thinking collectively all together. And that is hopefully what I'll be able to present tonight, is exactly how can we do that and show a national leadership position in our riding to impact not just our riding, but the whole country right now? It needs it.
Thank you both, Amanda and Mike. You have a heavy weight of responsibility on both of your shoulders, and the thanks of all of us for putting your names forward. Now, I'll just give you a bit of a description of what's to come. We have roughly 40 minutes where we'd like to have something of a quasi-structured debate around 4 topics that the board has come up with. What I will do is frame the issue and then hand it off to one or the other of you, and we'll just alternate back and forth. This is intended to be an open discussion, but feel free to push back, to challenge, to weigh in with views that you feel strongly about. This is really an opportunity for the members to really get to know you and to understand in what ways your approach, your personalities, your views on the issues differ from each other. So I will ask that you limit your comments to no more than 2 minutes at a stretch. And I really do encourage brevity. I think that if we make an effort to be brief, the back and forth will be optimal. So with that, I will sort of raise the first issue. Now, we are all very much still reeling from the news that we've heard recently of some of the mass grave discovered on some of the residential schools. This is a time when the subject of reconciliation with Aboriginal persons is really found its time. I am asking each of you, and Mike, I will start with you, to give everyone a sense of your views of what needs to be done to really get the process of reconciliation going so that it is meaningful and not just talk.
Sure. Well, first of all, there's 94 recommendations in the Truth and Reconciliation report. And one of the things that we tend to do as politicians is stand up and say, I got a new idea how to do everything. And I often feel that, no, if we just were accountable to what we have already agreed upon and negotiated, sometimes over a period of many years, and this is inclusive not just of UNDRIP and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but many of the things that we as Greens are calling for. So there's the Sustainable Development Goals, for example. It's a negotiated document. We just need to live up to it. And same thing with climate change. We've failed on nine accounts to be able to live up to what we've promised in the past. And so we've made commitments and we've said, here's the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Now we need to follow up on it. And one of the first things in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is that before you can reconcile, because I believe that was the question, you actually need to uncover the truth. And this is what's happening right now, is we're starting to actually see, and many Canadians are waking up to what happened in the residential schools. And I was commenting on this as I drove across Saskatchewan. I did a little Instagram because I was really struck. Because inside my soul, I look back and I go, was I fully aware? Like, when did I first find out about residential schools? And I know I was interviewing elders in the 80s who talked about residential schools. And I know I've been aware of residential schools and I visited them, but did I fully understand personally, egocentrically, the impact of what's happened in Canada and the stories? And I do believe we need to sit down and listen right now. Each one of us has to endure the discomfort of the information that is being unearthed right now, literally unearthed. And then beyond that, we need to take a more ethnocentric understanding and understand this is the settler culture that did this to the Indigenous peoples of this land. And then we need to examine, what does that mean even in our riding? Like on the Sunshine Coast here, how many people know that there was as many people living here, right? There's 30,000 Indigenous people living just on the Sunshine Coast. That's as many as live here now today and largely wiped out. And why? And that history needs to be taught in the schools. It needs to be uncovered in the media. It needs to be talked about politically. And then we have to listen to First Nations people about how will the process of reconciliation work for them first and foremost. And that's a tough conversation that we've just started to have happen now.
Thank you, Mike. Amanda, how do we go about this? There's been so much talk for so long. as a society, do we get real about making things right?
I'm gonna take a deep breath because I mean, I was talking to a member earlier today, and we really need to challenge our colonial history in a way that fundamentally challenges the status quo, the thinking, the laws behind the thinking. And we're going to have to start dismantling the structures that continue to oppress in all the ways that we do. And I love what Mike said. I think that starts with listening in a really meaningful way. It starts there, and then it needs to go beyond listening. I mean, I'm going to be honest. We've known about these type of schools for some time, and yes, we are waking up to it. And yes, there's further, science to support what we already knew was likely going on in these schools, and that's important. And that truth is important. And now we need to confront the fact that we have a very common foe, both the environmental movement and the Indigenous First Nations. And the common foe is a matrix between colonialism and capitalism. And these intersect in a way that has been very harmful. And we share the fact that it's been harmful in terms of the way that we extract, the way that we take over land, the way that we use it to profiteer, and our treatment of the land. And so we're going to have to do some more work, both internally in terms of our own party, and recognize that even sitting here in this room, we lack diversity, and we need to address that our inclusion practices, they might be a bit outdated. And we're really going to need to challenge and start to actually ask the questions of, why aren't we making this an attractive party? And why aren't we including more voices and diverse voices? And when we start to do that, then we're going to be able to actually have some meaningful action, because I think what's lacking right now is what we said earlier. There's a lot of talk and log. There's a lot of talk and develop. And it's the same with Indigenous reconciliation. We're just talking. And what Mike said is true. We need to start listening and acting. Indigenous inequality is real. We need to make meaningful change in terms of the inequalities that exist in our society.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. Now let's stay on this. I'll ask, and we'll go back in reverse order, and then I'll start with you. 2 things that you would do if you were an MP elected for your riding to help to move forward with the goal of reconciliation with Aboriginal people.
2 things. Number one, I would absolutely address the economic opportunities that really at the table right now exist. Our Green Recovery Fund has no attachments whatsoever to improving inequality in our region. So right now we're just putting out more money without any kind of meaningful change that we want in our community. So first off, I would say that our Green Recovery funding needs some accountability in terms of what we want for our community and improving inequalities in our communities. The second thing that is very much the case is that we need to start to fundamentally recognize whose land this really is. And really at the heart of it, we need to recognize that all of this land is not our land, and it does not, and property rights at present continue to benefit the colonial settlers who've settled here. And so we need to address the fact that our property rights and our legal institutions are fundamentally discriminatory. And so at our heart, we are going to have to start to tackle land rights here in our country.
Thank you, Amanda. Mike, same thing.
Yeah, well, Amanda has talked about economic inequalities and drawing attention to that. And I think that is worthwhile, but let us also do something unusual, which is to see through the eyes and the cosmology of Indigenous people in which they don't necessarily view themselves as poor or poverty struck, which came up last week. When I talk to them, they say, look, in our cultures, a person who is rich has access to elders, has access to the stories, to the culture. There's a sense of community. And if we actually spend time with Indigenous people, we quickly see that whose culture is poor in that context or that cosmology. If we measure economically all the time, or land-based rights, or all the things that our culture thinks about, then we see problems. But if we actually go and live with people, as I have with the people in the Amazon, I've worked with 22 different Indigenous groups in Canada, been on the front lines, when they are able to express their values in a way which makes the dominant culture seem very poor. Let's just even look at how they stress how important elders are in their culture. That's a rich culture. that treats its elders that way. And if we can switch our thinking and realize that the act of listening is also to reflect for people who can't see that, who can't see the positive that's going on, that's an act that a politician can do by upholding their rights on one hand, but celebrating on the other hand, the richness of our culture in Canada, which is something as a Canadian, I'm just immensely proud. When you look back at some of the historical, take the potlatch. I was at a potlatch in Bella Bella with David Suzuki. We're sitting there and you watch that their expression of to be wealthy is to give everything away like that. Now look at that as a Canadian and go, wow, that makes me proud as a Green Party person, because it's an expression of our ethics as Green Party people about ultimate care. How do we care and show up? So Indigenous people are something we can say, oh, we need to go help Indigenous people. Well, switch that thing around and go, maybe what we need is some help from Indigenous people as the dominant culture. And as politicians, that's where the listening becomes key. Very key to actually sit down and listen.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you both. This is a good topic. We have some questions in our question feed, which I hope to get around to. But just so we aren't caught short of time, I'm going to switch gears and talk about a subject that to every Green member is very, very close to their heart, and that is the issue of climate change. But more specifically, I want to focus on the climate change issue here locally for us. There are unique threats here to our local watershed, to our local airshed and air quality, and to food security. And I'll start with you, Mike, on this one. What do you see that can be done at the federal level, both as an MP in this riding, to be advancing and moving forward on those issues at a local level?
Yeah, well, you've hit one of the key issues that comes up in every part of the world that I visited, and that is the issue of scales. How do we act locally, but when there are constrictions at the federal level? A federal politician is a federal politician with a mandate and a jurisdiction on federal issues. And so, you know, a bike lane is not necessarily a federal issue, but how do we do those bike lanes unless there are federal policies in place that push and allow for municipalities and for provinces to be able to get these local things done? And this also happens to work globally. Canada cannot negotiate climate change on its own as if it's one country, irrespective of all other countries, which is why I've been very involved in international issues for some time and believe that a federal politician must have their eye on that ball. And I'll give you an example. If those 56 tons did release of methane in Siberia, that puts all of our emissions reductions. The liberals say, oh, we got 8.5 tons of emission reduction in 2019. Isn't that great? We did it through heat and so on. Well, we just blew it all in 1 month through permaculture in another part of the world. So if we don't act, literally act locally and do the bike lanes and do all the things that we all can do individually, but we as politicians have to show up within our jurisdiction. And as a federal politician, that's federal policy. And federal policy needs to be enacted within the context of the international policies like the Sustainable Development Goals, the Biodiversity Convention, all the things that we've signed on to and we need to be held accountable for. And that will enable the local person to get on their bike, do their personal part, but also know that nationally, provincially, at those other scales, the system's working in their favor. And those systemic larger issues is why I'm interested in federal politics. Those are big ones. Those are big, huge, low-bearing fruit that we need to tackle, and we need to do it as a collective, as a group of people that are going to make big changes so that the local changes add up, but the big changes do the shifts. So it's just like plastic bags. If we can all try to get our plastic, bring our cloth bag, or in one fell swoop, we can change the system and there's no more plastic bags. That's what we need at a federal level on climate change.
Thank you, Mike. Well, okay, Amanda, it was clear from your remarks earlier that you have an impatience for action. What are your views on what can be done at a federal level to stimulate positive action at the local level?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Right now, I think that our tax system needs some reform, some serious reform. And the Green Platform has really put forward a very progressive tax reform platform that I believe wholeheartedly in. And number one, that starts with the fact that we absolutely need to have a strong carbon tax. And we need, and of course the Liberals have put this in place, but it needs to be much more dramatic, because we absolutely need to stop the carbon at a local level. And certainly that's something that the federal government needs to do. And as Mike said, we need those big hammers done by the federal government. The next thing is that our food security system is broken. And I know very intimately the ins and outs of why it is broken, how it is broken. And I absolutely believe that at a federal level, we need to start to challenge how we import. We need embodied carbon emissions on every single item, so that now consumers can decide whether or not they actually want to be purchasing those embodied carbon emissions. And then lastly, we need clean air zones. We need to create accountability, and we need to have it so those clean air zones, similar to what Europe is doing, where you have paid zones that you enter into if you're going to enter into and use a vehicle in these clean air zones. And so there's, similar to Europe, we would model a similar thing in Canada, and that's what I would like to start working towards right away. Mike mentioned banning plastic bags. I mean, that's just the tip of the hat. No, I mean, the Liberal government has already introduced that we're gonna ban some elements of plastic, but plastic is in everything. It's in healthcare, right? We use it in so many elements, but we actually need, I mean, yes, we need to prevent it, but we need extended producer responsibility in every sector. And so manufacturers will need to be responsible and close the loop on the waste that they create. Plastics is just one. We have so many harmful garbage and waste that we produce in every sector, and we really need to close the loop on that.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. We're all struck again by the immediacy of the climate change issue with news of the United Nations report about to come out. The news that we have heard is not promising. We are hearing that even despite the slowdown in economic activity, carbon emission levels continue at their existing rates, whereas to get the job done, we need to see not only a freeze, but a drawdown. How do we initiate that sea change of attitude that needs to occur for us to get a grip on climate change?
Yeah, I can jump into that. In terms of mobilizing, I spend some time with this because really we're talking about a psychological issue in as much as it is a behavioral issue. And it starts with having every single conversation be about the climate emergency. It really is about putting it at the forefront and not ignoring it. We need to have it every day in all of our conversations, and we need to be talking about the concerns that we have over it and what we're doing about it. And we do need to confront our community and say, so, you know, what are you thinking of doing to make those behavior changes? And that kind of mobilization, it happens at the grassroots. Mike and I, of course, agree that this party is a grassroots party that's hyper local. We'll need to really focus on making sure that each of our circles of influence are growing. And so that's going to really galvanize us, really mobilize us. But there's energy in this party. We're the party of the future, right? We're the party of solutions. We're coming with the science. We're coming with our passions, right? And so this party now needs to really start to attract the youth and use that youth energy and really propel it forward. And Mike is accurate in the sense that the First Nations community is an opportunity for us to reach out into these communities and actually address the fact that there's a lot of disenfranchisement, that in terms of communities not feeling like they can participate in the system. This is the time to tell them that we need governments at all levels to really get on board. It's all hands on deck when it comes to the climate emergency.
Amanda, I'll just jump in. You know, you're absolutely correct in the sense that the energy that we have as the Green Party is that we've actually tabled in our Vision 2020 statement, for example, a whole series of solutions from local farm, you know, 100% organic farming. There's all these lists of ways in which we can actually do this. And I'll bring up two subjects here, which is that it used to be in climate change that we would argue about mitigation because we're trying to prevent something from happening.
Yeah.
Right now, right now it's 46 degrees in Kamloops, and people are having to deal with something that has happened already. And all over we see it, hurricanes in the south. It's happening. It's happening. People know that now. It's very, you don't have to really have the climate denier argument. I don't even bother anymore because there's 99% of people I talk to understand that climate change is here. But the conversation which we can have, just to go back to the previous question around locally, how can we act, is also around adaptation, because we are going to have to adapt at a local scale to something that's happening globally to all of us at the same time. And that is a unique challenge, which also brings in huge opportunities, because we can, for example, through renewable energy, provide so many more jobs. Like I was crossing the prairies, and I was going about how it's sunset on the fossil fuel industry. And that's not a bad thing. That can be seen opportunistically. The fossil fuel industry only has 125,000 jobs. In clean tech alone, we have 430,000 jobs, I read in the Hill Times this morning. Okay, and it is going to increase to 630,000 jobs by 2030. Now that's a positive story. So there's a positive green story. All the solutions are there, but we just have to get over that psychological hump, and that requires the leadership in Ottawa of people being able to not just talk about the problem, right, but to be able to point out that the solution looks pretty darn good. Like, what would you rather? I was out in the prairies. Like, what would I rather do if I was a prairie person? I want to feed my family. Would I rather drive out and fix the thing, the drill thing that goes up and down? Or would I rather work on a wind generator? They're the same to me if I just trying to feed my family, but one has a positive outcome. And that's the kind of talk that we can engage in with the population. Just say, look at all the cool things we could do. And we can do them really fast, as if it's an emergency, and switch the system. And that's going to require that kind of enthusiasm that Amanda is talking about. Let's get out there and make those changes and speak to them. Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, well, it kind of is a natural segue to the next topic, which is the subject of the energy industry in our country. We're a country that depends heavily on its energy sector. Locally, we have the LNG plant at Woodfibre. There are strong advocates on the part of the energy industry that would like to minimize the change, like the status quo with tweaks, perhaps to continue. I think those of us in the Green Party are largely convinced that something more serious than that is needed. How do you see, and I'll start with you, Mike. You talked about the need to engender enthusiasm and get the positive message out there.
Yeah, and the positive, yeah. Well,
there's something more than that is needed, to one might say. What are your views on how we're going to reconcile that tension between the energy industry and its importance in our economy and the need to transition to a more carbon neutral economy?
Well, the first thing is that we get stuck in polarities because the media loves it, right? This side's right, this side's wrong, etc. But when we in the Green Party insist on concepts like a just transition, what we're saying is that jobs are actually important, feeding your family is important, and the just transition allows us to move out of one thing which has become archaic and into another thing. It's not an either or. It's not a you're not going to have a job concept, right? And this is pretty important. I noticed today, actually, I got an email from the community outreach coordinator at LNG Woodfibre, wants to talk, want to talk. Well, why do they want to talk? Because what we're saying is, look, unfortunately, some things are going to become obsolete. And I was trying to explain this to somebody last night. There's a difference between the biotic carbon cycle and the non-biotic. And people think that the liberals say, we're just going to plant 4 billion trees, et cetera, and that the trees are going to solve the problem. But what's misunderstood about that is that when you pull fossil fuels out of the ground, you're pulling 600 million years worth of carbon out and putting it into an atmosphere which has a limited capacity to absorb it. Only 900 gigatons, we're halfway there, and we're going to blow that carbon budget within 12 years. So here's the thing, LNG people need to understand, you're not selling us a clean cigarette. I'm not going to buy that. The fossil fuel industry has to face the facts. It's moving out. And the wise ones, this is the interesting thing, is I've had conversations with the head of Shell, for example, and I've sat down, the head of Shell corporate department, and over a beer, and I said, you know the writing on the wall. And they're like, yeah, we know the writing on the wall. They can see it, right? When the International Energy Agency stands up, they used to be the most conservative speakers, and basically they were all for fossil fuels and they fought renewables. Well, now what are they saying? They're saying no new infrastructure in the fossil fuel industry, period, starting today. That's because they can see the writing on the wall. So our goal is not to be mean to these guys. It's to actually, well, I mean, they deserve a few things because of what they've done. But what I'm saying is we need to justly transition them out of the industry that they've been into positive forward clean tech industries where they can still have their jobs. Those families can still be fed, but the industry changes, it switches. So the LNG wood fiber thing, sorry, it's got to go. And let's throw up some wind turbines and let's call it a day. That thing's, we can't take any more out of the ground. We know that. The science is clear.
Thank you, Mike. Amanda, what are the well-placed blows or applications of force that the Green Party at the federal level can be applying to really help make that transition happen?
Yeah, I've written about this as well. I'm with Mike. I mean, liquefied natural gas is not natural. It is fracked. It is fracked gas, and we absolutely need to leave it in the ground. It is not a clean transition for us, and I absolutely believe we need to stop. So what does that mean for the gas industry, who have had a long time, by the way, to actually transition, and now are coming to the government and saying, we need bailouts. We need you to help us. You need to help us transition. And okay, it's like, okay, so we are willing to help you transition, but you must not make any kind of shareholder returns this year, right? That money has to absolutely go to the workers to be able to transition into other industries, non-harmful industries. As Mike mentioned, we have been advocating as a party for a just transition for workers. That starts with a guaranteed basic income. But in terms of, Jeff, what you're mentioning, in terms of what we can do on a federal level, we absolutely need to start to protect these areas. Wood fiber LNG and where it's planned to go is in the Howe Sound. And what we're talking about is we're actually going to be able to become a UN certified biosphere very soon. And I am absolutely astounded by and commend the work that has gone in for the last 30 years by Ruth. This work to protect that biosphere is absolutely essential, and the federal government should do everything in its power to make sure that we continue that work. We continue to protect this very abundant marine life that exists in that area. And yes, the conversations that are going to happen are going to be ones of confrontation, but we can do it, as Mike said, in a very conciliatory way where we say, these are harmful jobs. You don't need to be able to put food on your table just simply because you're in this industry. Let's help you get into another industry that actually is regenerative, not extractive.
Thank you, Amanda. All right, well, I'm going to move on to the last of our four topics. We are coming off of a global pandemic. We're coming off of a period of slowed economic activity, and we have the challenge of economic recovery in front of us. What do you see, and Amanda, I'll start with you, what do you see as being both the challenges and the possible opportunities inherent in the challenge that we face in recovering our economic strength?
Yeah, well, I am feeling this myself as a business owner as we continue to try to build back. And as we say, we like the idea of building back better. I would say let's just build better in general. The recovery is a deep one for many people. We're talking in my industry in terms of hospitality, it's probably going to take 6 to 8 years to recover in hospitality in general. And certainly at this point, the recovery money that's been coming out, it needs to be tied. It needs to be means tested. I've been overhearing people that have been using the recovery funding and not needed to. And this really disheartens me because I feel like the Liberals have really lacked in terms of their governance, in terms of how they administered those funds. And it really upsets me. You know, I overheard about Leon's who basically closed all their stores and then went for, you know, to ask the government for a bailout, which the government agreed to. And then that same year, they gave $155 million to their shareholders. And this kind of corruption can occur when we're not really working as a government to make sure that the people that are getting that money are absolutely getting it. A green recovery looks to me like one that has carbon emission accountability. Every single dollar that we spend in the government, it needs to be accountable. It needs to actually have emissions reporting. So if we're going to be doing a development project, it needs to have how much emissions that project is going to be doing and how we are going to reduce that or how we can prevent it. It also needs to have tied social accountability, where we're actually accountable to all government funding and making sure that it's actually improving equality in our communities and improving the quality of life for Canadians. That's how I think a green recovery will actually do what it needs to do and build a caring economy.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Mike, I'll just ask of you the same question, and then I'll have a follow-up question for both of you.
Sure. Well, I mean, this COVID, I say, let's not waste a good crisis, in the sense that this crisis has caused so many people to rethink. And one of the things that we can rethink is the idea of economic recovery versus well-being recovery, the recovery of a good way of life or well-being. And I say that because in so many indices of measuring, you can look at economic well-being and go, oh, they got a lot of money, or they got a good job, or their GDP is really high. All measures of that sort of economic well-being. But what COVID has done is so many people have sat back and gone, oh my gosh, I've got so much more time now to do this or to do that, and I'm not making any money, but they've still filled their day with energy to go to some priority that they weren't able to tackle before. And so this is a huge opportunity to ask that as a society, to go look, as a society, we were on this trajectory, this intense trajectory, and is it the right thing to do? So for example, 2 years ago, if you talked about universal income, people brought up all the reasons why it would be, the disaster would happen, the sky would fall. But then we get into CERB payments, and you actually support young people, and you realize the sky didn't fall, and you realize, well, maybe these things are possible. Maybe it is possible to live a life in which a different question is asked. So that it's not how fast can I, or what kind of big a truck can I get, but did I just want to go visit my family in Saskatchewan, and wouldn't a fast rail would have been great? Because it's to ask the deeper question of what is it that you want? And that's where the Green Party, I think, has got a huge opportunity. And I think also, just imagine also what's happening to people right now as they swelter in the heat. Tomorrow the schools are closed. Kids aren't going to school in Vancouver. Well, at what point do you start asking yourself, what is it that I want? Right? Like, was it the job and was the money and all those indicators, was that what was it all about? Or was it that I wanted my kid to be educated and I want them in a decent school and I want my kid to be able to survive the century? So those questions are, I say, don't waste a good crisis, in the sense that when you get asked these really profound, deeper questions about the meaning of what your personal life is and our collective life is, it provides a huge opportunity for us as Greens to promote what we believe in, which is a very long-term future for future generations way down the line. And economic recovery is not the priority. Well-being is the priority.
Mike, you've anticipated my next question, but it is that for so long, economic success has been, there's been a pervasive assumption that growth is essential to economic well-being and quality of life. You've already partially answered that question, but I'm about to hand it back to Amanda for her to have a shot at it. But do you have any other thoughts on how specifically, as a politician, federal politician, we can go about breaking that assumption? Breaking that paradigm of linking our assumption of that well-being is necessarily linked to economic growth.
Is that for me?
Well, I think probably I will give it to you.
Okay.
Mike has already given a pretty good
Yeah.
part of that, so
No. Yeah. No. I mean, Mike and I definitely share some very shared values in terms of building a life affirming economy, and certainly that's my platform, is that we need a caring economy, and that really it's a real shift away from a neoliberal framework that has dominated. And so certainly when we're starting to measure well-being, what we're looking at is the health and the thriving of our communities. And so that gets back to an earlier question, is that really the municipalities produce 80% of the emissions. So what we really need to be focused on is really supporting our municipalities to do the work that they want to do. And that means bike lanes, bike infrastructure, which will improve quality of life for all of our communities, more walking neighborhoods, right? Affordable housing. But what does it mean to build affordable housing? Well, it means we need to actually develop, right? So how can we support our municipalities to do it in a way that has as little impact as possible while still providing housing for our communities? And that gets down to, Jeff, as you mentioned, like we need to move away from measuring what we've always measured, which is gross domestic product. Emphasis on product, right? Like, no, we need to start measuring gross national happiness, right? Thriving communities. And when we start to measure what matters to us, that's when we really start to change as a community. And so we need to start building that into the very core budgets of each of our municipalities, is those measurements. And that starts at the local level. We need to be measuring how our communities are doing and how they're thriving. And that goes into all the measures of our economy, because our economy thrives based on the health of our people and our planet. So they're intimately connected. And we absolutely need to start moving away from measuring our success based on transnational corporations and gross domestic product.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, we've got a few minutes left for some questions. We don't have to be finished at 8 on the dot. We want to aim to be finished as close to that as possible. But we have a question which I will just read to you both, and maybe you could both take a stab at answering in your way. But the question is, it's to ask the candidates to speak to how they would work with Indigenous communities to help to repair the damage done by colonization in the present day. And the example given is the residents of Mount Currie. They were forced onto a floodplain when the area was colonized, and that land is now under flood warning. What could and should be done, for example, to support that particular community? Mike, I'll kick off with you.
Sure. You know, yesterday I drove through Pemberton. I actually stopped in the floodplain and took a picture and did an Instagram. Amanda, you'd be proud of me. I did an Instagram. Anyway, the point is I did an Instagram on this because what you can see some things that are coinciding here when you look at colonial history is where do we put our First Nations? We often put them on very small places, marginalized land, etc. And it's all, you have to systemically see, not just the one phenomena of the floodplain, or the phenomena that often people who are economically impoverished suffer the impacts of climate change disproportionately to people who have luxury yachts and go and sit on the yacht, right? So there's a big difference. And when we systemically look at what's going on with Indigenous people, we see a pattern. And this is something that we brought to the attention of the Canadian government when we did a report on the Sustainable Development Goals and tackled this exact issue. Like over 70% of Indigenous children in Manitoba are living in dire poverty, economic poverty. So remember, I differentiated between economic poverty and community well-being and so on. I'm differentiating it from just measuring that one indicator. But what I'm trying to point out here is that when we disaggregate the data and we sit down and we speak with Indigenous people about what's going on for them in these different aspects of their lives, we can uncover the patterns, and you can see the colonial history of those patterns as well. And therein, we can also start to address them by listening. This is the key thing, though, is you can't provide solutions. You got to hear what is the solution that they are proposing. That is the answer here. Is you got to sit down and go, okay, what's the pattern? Can we see the big picture? What are you proposing? What's going to work for you? And this is something that's come out, so many times. I remember sitting in an African village and everybody was listing all their problems. And then I said to them at one point, I said, but what are the solutions in your community? The things that you think you could do right now? And wham, there was a list really fast and the energy shifted. You see what's going on? Like if we only see the problems with Indigenous communities, instead, if we sit down, talk to them here, what are your solutions? What are the ways that you want to move forward? And then from that conversation, we actually enact them. That's decolonization. It's to switch the power dynamic around and go, okay, look, we're going to listen for a while. We're going to react, not do stuff to you. Okay. That makes sense.
Thank you. All right. Well, we're closing, getting close to our finish, but we have a question that is off of any of the topics that we've discussed, but it is a very important one for anyone in your shoes running for office. To become an MP, you have to get elected. And to get elected, you need to be an attractive candidate to voters of different stripes. How will you each speak to conservative, liberal, and NDP voters as you run across them on the stump and in your campaigning? And I'll start with you, Mike, and we'll let Amanda have the last word on that.
Sure, this comes up, I think, in terms of a philosophy of how you see and talk to people. And I kind of am of the school that everyone holds a partial truth, and that actually none of us are 100% right. Even though we in Greens think we're sure we're right, and I'll stand up and I'm sure I'm right and so on. I'm actually just holding a perspective. And I often, I'll just grab this book here, because this is how I've often explained it, is you guys are seeing a blue book and you'll swear it's a blue book because from your perspective, it's blue. But if I switch it around and say, no, it's actually green and got a kid on it, we see that we're each holding a partial truth. And this is true of conservative values, liberal values, and NDP values. From their trained lens, how they have grown up and been and seen information, they're seeing a truth and they're sure of it. But if we can do, instead of a debate, as we're doing tonight, Amanda and I have done a wonderful thing, which is to have a dialogue in which we can actually build perspectives and see both perspectives, her perspective, my perspective, and we can come to third perspectives, which actually allow us to see that that's a child's book. There's a whole to it. And that's something we do need to do better. And I think the Greens are one of the only parties that say this, that say, look, we're not diametrically opposed to conservative values, all of them. There are some that hold a partial truth. And there are some liberal values and some NDP values. And from that, the Greens are able to cross over and be able to talk about the things that we all share. And I remember once doing a conflict workshop with Chris Mazer, who said to me, he said, in the most toughest conflict resolutions in like resource towns he's ever been into, if he sits down and talks to people at their core values, 80% of the time they agree on 80% of the things. So it's the 20% that we're disagreeing on, but we're assuming that we're completely diametrically opposed to them. And I can tell you right now, if I go into southern Saskatchewan where everybody's voting conservative, I can still have a conversation, I can still relate, I can still see the partial truths of what it is that they're trying to get at. And that's what we have to do as Greens, is we have to enter the conversation with that kind of humility, which is to hear their partial truth and find some way to transcend and include their truth with our truth to find these third truths, and so we can move forward.
Amanda, how will you speak to those voters of other stripes?
Love that. I think that ideologically we sit on a spectrum that's also a circle, right? And we study this, and what we know is that voting habits are very much informed by our parents' voting habits. These are, socialized in us, and additionally, voting is a social act. So really, when we're considering the social actness of it, that connection that we're going to make in terms of this campaign, in terms of connecting with each person, absolutely connecting, finding out about where their children go to school, what are the challenges that they have, what are their issues that are most important. That's where you're starting to hear and connect. But really, it's also about bringing yourself to the table. And Mike and I have talked a lot about listening, and absolutely that comes first. But then it's also about connecting. It's about making that person also feel that you share in their issues, that you actually have felt some of what they've felt, and finding that common ground. And that's really going to move voters, because I think that we all realize and all recognize that we are facing a climate emergency. And which person is going to absolutely keep our government accountable to making sure that our children have a future?
Thank you both. Mike, I thought you said it well, and I agree that this debate has been a model of intelligent exchange of views, of different views, but just the process that we follow in interacting can be as important as the content. And I think as Greens, we can all be proud that we've gotten that. And Elizabeth May was such an effective leader for us in instilling that sense in all of us.
Jeff, can I just add something here? And that's that, and Amanda, jump in too. I'm sure you're gonna have something to say on this, but this is also an opportunity for us not just to model it within our EDA, but I think we have just this wonderful, unbelievable opportunity within our riding, because it's a four-way race, to model this kind of dialectic. It's not a debate. We're so stuck in a climate change problem that we're going to need every brain we can. We're going to need the private sector, like you say, Amanda. We're going to need the civil society solutions leaders, and we're going to need politicians, and none of them can lead on their own. We're going to need everybody to be able to come together, to put all our brains together, because the wicked problem of what we're engaged in right now is eluding all of us. And so we have this unique opportunity in this riding to be able to speak with Avi and to speak with Patrick and do it in a dialectic, in a way that's going to push us further. And people can around the country can see, wow, those guys are really in a different conversation over there on the West Coast. And that's something, Greens, I think we could do it. Now, I know you and I have had been doing it. Why can't we do it in our riding, right?
Yeah, I believe that too. And we will. Both Mike and I will make sure that this campaign, that this riding is really represented well, and that the Green Party is represented well. And it really comes down to the members that are in this party. And so I think both Mike and I would like to take this moment to thank each and every one of you that are here tonight, because really you are the ones that are making this a stronger democracy, a stronger party. It's you that are here today because you've decided that it takes more than just listening. It takes more. It takes actually becoming active and making sure that we do what we need to do to address the climate emergency. So thank you.
Yeah, well said. Yeah.
Thank you both. That ends the debate portion of this meeting. Richard, I will pass the baton back to you.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to our two candidate nominees for a very spirited discussion. Wonderful to have the opportunity to come around and talk about the values that bind us together and what we see as the future. And hopefully we'll be able to convince lots and lots of other people that that's the right way to go. At this point, we're a little bit over 8 o'clock. I don't see any other business that people would like to conduct or do. Just looking around at the other board members, I'm not seeing anybody saying, no, we need to do something else. So I'd like to bring the meeting to a close. I would like to thank the board members who have put their time to good use this evening and to help the process along. I'd like to thank Jeff Schouten as our guest moderator this evening. Thank you. And most of all, to our two candidates for putting their names forward, for agreeing to do this, to be such strong and committed candidates, and to provide our membership with two very strong candidates to choose between. I'd also like to thank the attendees this evening who took time out of our otherwise very warm evening to attend this meeting and to listen to our candidates and help to make their choice about who they think would like to be candidate in the next federal election. I would like to remind everyone this evening on the call, and please speak to other Green Party members. Everyone should be expecting to receive a bulk email sometime around 9 o'clock tomorrow morning with a ballot and instructions of how to vote online. The email may come from the Green Party of Canada. It may say something to do with Simply Voting, which is the platform the Green Party is using to conduct the vote in a secure manner. Once the ballots are sent out, that will begin a 48-hour period where everybody can make their vote known. And at the end of that, then the successful candidate with the most votes will be announced. That announcement will come by bulk email out to everyone who is registered, who has an email, and also posted on our website and our social media accounts. So with that, I think we can bring a very successful meeting this evening to a close. Thank you to everyone.